Incredible transformation. How a $15,000 fine revealed the hidden potential of a hot dog vendor. Charlie wiped sweat from his brow, the summer sun beating down as he watched the busy intersection of Clark and Division. For years, he stood behind his hot dog cart, bustling with regulars who took him for granted. One with everything. They shouted, barely glancing at him, their voices blending into the urban hum. Beneath the surface, he was a man teetering on the brink, the weight of life heavy on his shoulders. The aroma of sizzling sausages mixed with the city's grit felt like an old friend, yet nostalgia turned sharp. It reminded him of the dreams he'd once shared with Anna, the restaurant, the family. But today felt different. The hot sun was eclipsed by a dark wave of anxiety. As he prepared for lunch rush, a city inspector approached, clipboard in hand, a storm cloud casting its shadow over him. The inspector's strict demeanor felt like a harbinger, and it wasn't long before Charlie's world spiraled into chaos. A $15,000 fine for selling without a permit. The words hit him like fists to the gut, forcing the breath from his lungs. "This has to be a mistake," he stammered, but the inspector merely handed over the papers, already moving on to the next stand. It felt like a cruel joke in a life filled with loss. Charlie's heart raced. The lives of those he loved weighed in the balance, between this fine and the future of his 10-year-old son, Ethan. Would he have to tell Ethan they were losing everything? The hot dogs weren't just food, they were his lifeline, and now that lifeline was fraying before his eyes. He was trapped in a reality where he was more invisible than ever, a mere vendor drowned in bureaucracy and grief. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A pit formed in Charlie's stomach as he struggled not to drown in despair. How had he come to this? The tension festered within him, narrowing his vision to his cart, reflecting lost potential. In the years since Anna's passing, grief had crafted an intricate cage around his heart, and now this fine threatened to shatter his fragile foundation. He barely recognized himself. Did he even have the strength to fight? Desperation surged, smothering any flicker of hope. He thought of calling his estranged grandfather, Alan, but panic bubbled in his chest, suffocating the impulse. What could he possibly do? Yet, the memories of Alan's fierce spirit fighting for justice in a world that often claimed it not at him. A fragmented thought flickered, reclaiming his story. Yet the fear remained, what if he failed? The murmurs of skepticism seemed to echo louder. As Charlie stood there, the barrier with his grandfather felt like a chasm, each day more intimidating than the last. Would he manage to bridge the gulf or lose himself completely? In that moment, every hope he had seemed like a cruel joke. Charlie stood still, the faint hum of the city filling the silence around him. The paper in his hand felt both tangible and surreal. He could not shake the feeling that it represented every decision that led him to this moment. Each yes and every no echoed like a distant alarm. The weight of the fine hung heavy, but beneath that oppression flowed a trickle of determination that began to break the surface. He needed to act, to regain some semblance of control. The thought of confronting Alan felt increasingly viable. The old man was gruff, abrasive even, but he had always believed in fighting back against injustice. Perhaps Charlie could tap into that spirit. In an impulsive moment, he pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the contact list. The screen lit up with Alan's name. Charlie's heart raced. Could he conquer the fear that had built a wall taller than the skyscrapers surrounding him? Clenching the phone, he took a deep breath and pressed call. The ringing tone felt like a countdown, each beat pulling him deeper into uncertainty. When the voice on the other end finally answered, Charlie's tongue stumbled over the familiar bitterness. "Grandpa? It's me. Charlie. Yeah, I know who this is. What do you want?" Alan's voice dripped with impatience, but Charlie sensed an underlying current of concern. I need help, came his quiet admission. The admission alone felt liberating, as if he had shattered the first beam of the cage that had long held him. I got fined. The city's threatening to take everything. Silence loomed, stretching tensely in the air. Then, Alan's tone softened just enough to reveal a hint of compassion. What did you do to get yourself into this mess? Charlie swallowed hard, explaining the details, the sense of injustice rising in his voice. Every word he released felt like a stepping stone, mapping out the reality he had struggled to ignore. All right, we'll figure something out, Alan said, and in that moment, Charlie felt a flicker of urgency ignite a long-dormant passion within him. After they ended the call, Charlie paced around the cart, his thoughts colliding like traffic at the intersection in front of him. How could he turn this situation into something productive? A bold idea sparked. The city and its public opinion could be both a weapon and a shield, if only he could tap into it. If he could create a social media campaign to rally support, calling for fairness and the right to work, perhaps he could turn the tides. It was risky, yet so was doing nothing. He grabbed his phone again, staring at the screen with resolve. He began drafting a message, detailing his story, the realities of being a vendor, the struggles people faced without permits. There was a chance people could rally behind him, could share their own stories, and maybe, just maybe, they could create a wave of change that would wash over the bureaucratic barriers. Collectively sharing the burden could turn his isolation into a network of support. He envisioned it, a community of marginalized workers fighting back against the system. For the first time in a long time, Charlie felt a sense of purpose blooming in his chest. The fight wasn't just about him, it was about everyone trapped in the gears of indifference. Yet, as he weighed his options, a new worry crept in. What if he failed? What if calling attention to his plight drew more ire from the city instead of sympathy? Just as he began to lay out a plan, a wave of doubt washed over him, threatening to extinguish the light he had reignited. The next hour would be critical. Decisions stacked atop one another like the condiments in his cart, and Charlie knew it wasn't just about the fine anymore. It was about defining who he was. With that thought solidifying in his mind, he prepared himself to act. But first, he needed to confront the most daunting question: who was he willing to become in the face of such adversity? As the sun hung heavily in the sky, casting an unforgiving glow, Charlie realized it was time to rise to the occasion to transform the darkness into something that could finally clear a way forward. And then it struck him, it was now or never. The time had come to face not just the city, but his past, his fears. With resolve forging anew, he felt an urge to reach out to Ethan. A conversation about courage and resilience would serve as the perfect cornerstone for his endeavor. But what awaited him after he spoke to his son would change everything. Charlie inhaled deeply, the air thick with a blend of determination and anxiety as he prepared to call Ethan. His mind raced with memories of their past conversations, moments when he had felt most vulnerable and simultaneously most supported. There was a stark contrast to the tension thundering in his chest now, driven by a need for validation and strength. The day's events had set him on a path of confrontation one he had never envisioned taking. The phone rang, and the waiting felt torturous. His thoughts darted back to the times he had encouraged Ethan to pursue his dreams, to be bold. Now, reversing roles, Charlie hoped to draw from that same courage. Would his son still see him the same way? Would he understand the gravity of this moment? "Hey, Dad," Ethan answered, the sound of his son's voice lighting a flicker of hope in Charlie's heart. "Ethan, I need to talk." "It's important," Charlie managed, his stomach clenching under the weight of dread and anticipation. "What is going on?" Ethan asked, his tone shifting to concern. Charlie caught himself fighting to articulate not just the fine but the bigger picture of what he hoped to achieve. "I got fined, $15,000. "They what? How did that happen?" Ethan interrupted, disbelief evident in his voice. Charlie felt exposed but pushed through, explaining the incident and the unfairness he felt. With Ethan listening, he began to detail his idea for a social campaign, how he believed their voices could turn the tides of injustice. As he spoke, Charlie could sense a transformation within himself, a new facet of his character awakening, one that was not simply a vendor cornered by circumstance but a father fighting for what was right. "Okay, this is big," Ethan remarked thoughtfully, processing the implications. "Are you sure you want to take this on? It's not just about me anymore, son. It's about everyone like me who feels powerless." Words poured out like the toppings from a well-used squeeze bottle. "This is my chance to stand up, to force the city to recognize the plight of vendors like us. You have to be careful, Dad. This could backfire. The city doesn't like being challenged." He understood the caution, but it felt different now. Charlie was no longer simply facing an unavoidable fate. He was staring down a future shaped by action. "I can't afford to stay silent," he replied, voice steadying. "If I do nothing, this fine will destroy me, and I refuse to let that happen." "I'm with you," Ethan said finally, and the words felt like a hefty weight lifted off Charlie's shoulders. "But we need to be strategic about it. What specifically do you want to achieve?" That question hung in the air, forcing Charlie to confront the most critical aspect of his endeavor, the end goal. "I want people to understand our struggles, to see us as people, not just revenue sources. I want change and support, maybe even create a platform for others to tell their stories." He found his son's excitement igniting a spark in him he didn't know he had. Together they brainstormed ideas, integrating Ethan's tech-savvy insights with Charlie's lived experience. They discussed timing, specifics of the messaging, and even how to make it compelling enough to draw widespread attention. As the conversation unfolded, Charlie felt the room around him pulsating with energy. His cart, once a symbol of his limitations, morphed into an epicenter for potential change. He realized that the reason he had felt so trapped was not just by the financial burden but by his own doubts. The act of sharing his vision, of bringing Ethan into the fold, had solidified the path forward, transforming anxiety into purpose. But amidst the hopeful brainstorm, a gnawing doubt crept back in. Could he really hold up under the scrutiny and pressure? With each idea they generated, Charlie faced that familiar question: who was he willing to become? It was no longer just a battle against the city but an internal conflict about identity and resilience. The conversation led him to a sudden pivotal awareness. He needed allies, not just in Ethan, but among his fellow vendors. They too had stories worth telling. He could feel the gears turning, a strategic plan slowly coalescing around him. As they wrapped up their call, Charlie's heart raced with fresh resolve. It was time to proactively seek out those allies, but would they share their stories? Deciding to reach out to his fellow vendors ignited a blend of excitement and trepidation within him. The stakes were high, but the stakes had always been high. This moment could define not only his future but the future of many others. Charlie put his phone down, staring blankly at the street ahead. He knew the next call wouldn't just be important, it would be transformative. He had chosen to stand up, but would he find the community he needed? In the back of his mind, a persistent thought lingered: could he step into the role of a leader when it was time to gather his peers? Charlie stared at his phone, the weight of his next steps curling around him like a heavy fog. The air tasted bitter with uncertainty, but determination simmered beneath the surface, pressing him onward. He wasn't ready to lead, not yet, but the thought of falling short ignited a fire within him. With a deep breath, he opened his contacts and scrolled through the names of fellow vendors. They had all shared lunch breaks, gossiping under the sun while the customers swarmed around. But now, their jovial camaraderie felt distant, overshadowed by the looming challenge. Perhaps they too had stories intertwined with strife and triumph, perhaps they could be allies in his struggle. He bit his lip, choosing the first name on the list: Olivia, the taco vendor with a smile that could brighten the dreariest of days. It had always struck him how she managed to turn a simple meal into an experience, her laughter mingling with the aroma of cilantro and lime. There was strength in her spirit. "Hey, Olivia," he greeted, trying to mask the shaky tremor in his voice. "It's Charlie. I hope you're doing well." "Charlie. Good to hear from you. What's up?" The lightness in her response buoyed his spirits, but the gravity of his needs pressed down again. "I wanted to talk about something important. Can we meet up soon?" "Of course, you sound serious." Is everything all right? Charlie hesitated, the words feigning a quick exit from his mind. It's not exactly all right, but I believe we can turn it around. Can we meet for coffee? Maybe tomorrow? Sure thing. I'll bring the good beans, she joked, but he could sense the underlying concern in her tone. After hanging up, he found himself staring at the wall, his heart racing as he navigated the rush of possibilities mingled with fear. Would Olivia be on board? What if she thought he was overstepping? The moment held potential. It could either be a collaboration or a confrontation, another drain on his dwindling resolve. Still, he felt compelled to reach out. Next, he texted Jai, the local smoothie vendor whose inventiveness made him a favorite among the regulars. After a brief exchange, they arranged to meet later in the week. Knowing that he had at least one ally suddenly felt like a lifeline, and it stirred a previously unrecognized motivation within him. Perhaps there was more to this than just a response to a fine. Days passed, each one characterized by alternating currents of doubt and hope. Charlie spent the evenings crafting a message, a call to his network, a plea not for pity but unity. He needed them to understand the significance of collective voices. It was a risk, but it was one he was willing to take. As he prepared for the meeting with Olivia, butterflies swirled in his stomach. To his surprise, he found that he no longer felt like a mere vendor trying to survive. He felt the stirrings of a leader rising within. The idea of empowering others ignited a passion he didn't know was simmering beneath layers of worry and self-doubt. At the cafe, the aroma of fresh coffee enveloped him, adding to his nervous energy. When Olivia arrived, her usual cheer was dulled by a hint of concern, but as Charlie began to speak about his challenges and vision, he felt the shift. She listened intently, nodding with understanding, and the conversation morphed into a brainstorming session about potential narratives they could all share. People need to know us, Charlie, she urged, her eyes shining. They need to see that we're more than what they think. We're fighting for our lives, our families. Her enthusiasm was infectious. Together, they mapped out ideas, sketching a rough outline for a campaign that would give voice to their struggles. The collaboration deepened their camaraderie, and as Charlie looked into Olivia's unwavering gaze, a rush of confidence pushed him to vocalize his aspirations. How incredible would it be to invite everyone to join us? To show the city the faces behind the carts. Olivia's expression morphed into raw determination. We need to amplify our collective strength. But can we handle the backlash? Charlie's gut tightened. The city had acted decisively before pushing back against voices seeking change. But he didn't shy away this time. Instead, the thought invigorated him. We can't let fear silence us. It's exactly what they want. As they navigated these ideas, Charlie realized this wouldn't just be a campaign. It could mold him into a figure of resilience within his community. Yet the question gnawed at him: could the initiative rise beyond mere words? Could they actualize a transformation? That doubt had planted its roots, but it only fed his fire. Each conversation spurred another, and with every discussion, he questioned the very essence of his leadership. Who did he aspire to be, and what legacy did he wish to carve? While the initial goal had stemmed from a function of survival, it was evolving quickly into a quest for meaning, autonomy, and acceptance in a world that often saw him as invisible. Charlie felt the beat of uncertainty against his chest but took solace in the momentum building around him. He hadn't come this far to turn back now. As he stepped out of the cafe, determination coursed through his veins. He faced a new challenge ahead, one that would require courage and vulnerability. But would the others rise to his call? Would they choose to join him, or would he find himself standing alone against a daunting city? The sun poured through the cafe's window, illuminating the scattered notes and doodles strewn across the table. Charlie's pulse quickened as he organized his thoughts into a cohesive plan. Meetings with Olivia and Jai had awakened something dormant within him, a sense of purpose he hadn't recognized before. No longer merely a vendor, he was emerging as a catalyst for change, grappling with the ambitions that surged through him. He found himself caught between excitement and fear. With an equal measure of resolve, he scribbled goals for their campaign: amplify their stories, showcase their struggles, and build a united front. But beneath these aspirations lurked the haunting specter of doubt. Could he truly lead people when he still felt like he was stumbling through the darkness himself? His thoughts drifted to Olivia again. Her fierce passion and hopeful outlook illuminated a path forward. Their brainstorming session had birthed tangible ideas, and now it was his responsibility to transform them into action. This entire endeavor could pivot on his ability to communicate, to inspire. But first, he needed to solidify his own understanding of what leadership meant in this context. Motivated, Charlie decided to delve deeper into his own narrative. He sat down at his desk, and with fervor, began crafting a personal story that blended vulnerability and strength. Memories of his parents, the sacrifices they made to provide for their family, flooded his mind. The struggles he faced as a hot dog vendor stemmed not just from a fine but from generations of striving for a better life. He envisioned weaving this into his campaign. If individuals could connect with the humanity behind each vendor, maybe they wouldn't just see faces but stories, resilience manifesting in every sauce-laden bun. Over the next few days, Charlie reached out to other vendors, individual by individual. Each conversation echoed with a mixture of encouragement and skepticism. Some were hesitant, burdened by their own fears of confrontation. Others sprang to life with spirited ideas, and as their input poured in, so did a rush of adrenaline. But Charlie found himself struggling when one particular vendor, Tara, expressed her doubts more pointedly than the rest. "Charlie, it's a noble idea, but you really think we can change anything? What power do we have against the city?" Her frustration was palpable. In that moment, the weight of his previous doubts resurfaced. How could he ask for change when he himself was unsure? The realization struck him like a lightning bolt. The power, he realized, lay not only in the vendors themselves but in their willingness to stand together, fueled by a common purpose. With a firm resolve, he challenged Tara, tapping into the depths of his newly discovered leadership potential. "We've all felt the pulse of rejection in this city. We have a chance to rewrite our narrative, to define who we are in the face of those that dismiss us. But if we don't at least try, we surrender before the battle begins." Their eyes met, and for the first time, a flicker of understanding seemed to pass between them. It was at that moment he felt a shift not just within himself but across the room. Empowerment wasn't just about the risky idea of campaigning, it was ignited in the tiny sparks of individual resolve. That evening, they met again at the park, now a makeshift gathering of vendors united under their shared mission. Charlie felt their energy coalesce, notes and ideas swirling in the air, coalescing into something larger than himself. Yet there remained a nagging question: were they all truly ready to risk their complacency for something uncertain? Would they step out from the shadows they comfortably inhabited? As they outlined their plan, each idea tossed about transformed into a palpable energy. But lurking in the background, doubt crept in again, sparking memories of past failures, the wrong turns he had taken as a vendor, and how easy it would be to retreat into the safety of apathy. Charlie stood before the group, pulse racing as he sensed the gaze of each vendor. He placed his hands firmly on the table, leaning in as he ignited his voice with conviction. "We either let this fine define us, or we redefine what it means to be heard." The silence hung in the air, as every person present absorbed his words. Inside, Charlie felt like a coiled spring, ready to transform this moment into something greater than himself, fueled by a collective purpose tempered by the trials of vibrant individual stories. But as the meeting unfolded and excitement brewed, a piercing thought cut through the atmosphere. What if the city responded with even harsher measures than before? What if their fight backfired? Charlie looked around at the faces gathered in that warm twilight, so many brave, vulnerable souls standing on the precipice of change. Ready or not, the moment for action was coming. Tomorrow, he would face a reality far beyond simple litanies of shared identity. As determined as he felt, the heaviness of impending confrontation lingered in his gut. Would they find the strength to confront the system, or would they falter when faced with pushback? Tomorrow, he would start to learn the answer, with everything hanging in the balance. As dawn broke the next morning, Charlie slipped out of bed, his thoughts a tangled web of anticipation and anxiety. He could almost feel the weight of the day pressing down on him, its invisible tendrils reaching into his mind, whispering doubts. Yet, there was something different about this morning. He stood taller, embodied the resolve that had ignited within him just days before. This was the moment to solidify his newfound purpose. After a quick cup of coffee, Charlie prepared for the meeting, each step intentional as he laid out his notes and outlined the strategy. The cafe buzzed with energy as he entered, the familiar clinks of cups and chatter of early morning patrons grounding him in the reality of the task ahead. The space felt less like a cafe and more like a battleground. His pulse responded in kind, hammering with the fear and excitement of a budding leader. Olivia arrived first, her expression a blend of determination and worry. "Are you ready for this, Charlie?" she asked, her voice steady yet tinged with concern. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, forcing a confident smile that didn't fully mask his trepidation. Jai sauntered in next, brimming with enthusiasm that seemed to shimmer like the sunlight pouring through the window. "We can do this. We just need to rally everyone around a shared vision." His energy was infectious, but the flicker of doubt remained in Charlie's chest, nagging at the corners of his mind. Could he really unify them? Despite himself, Charlie began to doubt his capacity to lead the meeting and communicate effectively. But deep down, he knew that hesitation could lead to failure. He needed to project confidence, even if it felt like he was grappling with his own insecurities. As the other vendors trickled in, he felt the weight of the moment coalesce like a storm cloud building in the sky. They gathered around the makeshift table, faces weary yet hopeful. With a swift inhale to steel himself, Charlie launched into the agenda. "Thank you all for coming today. I know we're navigating uncertain waters, but this isn't just about one fine or one vendor. It's about changing the narrative that has marginalized us for too long." He locked eyes with Tara, who had been skeptical before. An unspoken understanding flickered between them as the words flowed. "Our stories deserve to be heard. They represent resilience and defiance. We can walk into the city hall, not as individuals who face defeat, but as a collective striving for justice." The murmurs of agreement ignited the energy in the room, fueling Charlie's motivation to push through his own internal struggles. He introduced the idea of a presentation, a creative showcase of their stories, complete with visuals and personal testimonials, to illuminate the humanity and plight behind every vendor's experience. Yet, as he pitched this idea, a shadow of concern clouded his thoughts. What if their realities vastly diverged? What if not everyone was willing to lay bare their struggles? He felt a pang of vulnerability, recognizing that the authenticity he urged might hide their greatest fears. "Will you stand with me, not just as vendors but as storytellers?" Charlie's voice was firm but tinged with uncertainty. "We have to confront what has been done to us as a collective." A few hesitant nods reinforced his resolve, but Tara's lingering expression of doubt revealed a broader malaise. "What if nothing changes?" she said, her voice shattering the momentum. In that pause, Charlie caught sight of the faint fracturing of unity. Without a clear answer, he felt his heart racing. He expressed his own fears, admitting that he too had wrestled with doubt. But as he laid his soul bare before them, he felt an unexpected lightness, a paradoxical strength born from vulnerability. Change often starts with a single voice. Let us make sure it isn't just mine. Each of you holds power that can shift the very ground we stand on. Tara's face softened, the stubborn lines of doubt beginning to fade. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we need to step into the limelight, even if it's scary." The words echoed, and Charlie's resolve deepened that they would need to press on, whatever faced them. The tension rose as they began brainstorming ways to execute their ideas, previously dormant ambitions now stirring in the brightness of potential. As the meeting drew to a close, Charlie felt the exhilarating weight of the challenge ahead. The dawning realization hit him full force. Tomorrow would not simply be a presentation, it would be a crucible testing every ounce of resolve within him and the vendors gathered. The final thought echoed in his mind as they collected their things. How would they fend off the city's backlash if confusion clouded their purpose? With everything on the line, Charlie felt the impending storm rumble on the horizon. What would happen when they stood united to demand change? Charlie inhaled deeply, ready to take the leap into the unknown as fear and determination melded within him. This was only the beginning, and the fight was just unfolding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, darkening the sky with shades of twilight, Charlie's heart raced in sync with the waning light. The hours spent in thoughtful planning and intense brainstorming had shifted to immediate action. Standing in front of the mirror, he fixed his tie, practicing a confident smile. Yet, with every passing moment, doubt crept beneath the surface. Was he really prepared for the confrontation that loomed ahead? The next morning arrived, thick with the scent of possibility and nerves. Each vendor would share their narrative, exposing their triumphs and struggles that had long been kept hidden. Charlie reviewed his notes on the stories they had crafted together, anxious to ensure he could articulate their weight when the time came to advocate for them. The notion of their vulnerability weighed heavily on him. He sensed the impact words could make, but a chilling uncertainty whispered whether the city officials would listen. Gathered together at the makeshift venue, Charlie watched the other vendors trickle in, their faces painted with a mix of resolve and apprehension. They had taken a calculated step into this unknown arena, and Charlie could feel the solidarity forming around them. Yet, as he looked into the eyes of his colleagues, a question echoed in his mind. Were they truly ready to stand together in the face of potential backlash? "Are you all ready?" he asked, his voice ringing out more forcefully than he felt. The response was hesitant but growing louder, a flurry of nods and weak smiles that conveyed a fragile resilience. As they took their positions, Charlie could feel the atmosphere shift. Olivia stood to his right, her face a mirror of determination that bolstered his own wavering spirit. However, even as he prepared to begin, he sensed Tara's lingering apprehension nearby, her arms wrapped around herself like a protective barrier. There was no turning back. He stepped forward, inhaling deeply to steady himself. "Thank you for being here. This moment is significant not just for us individually, but as a collective force." His heart raced, but he pressed on. "We're not just asking for understanding, we're demanding it. Our stories are valid and powerful. This fine is only a symptom of a much larger issue." A ripple of murmurs coursed through the crowd of vendors, a mark of their growing confidence. Charlie noticed the way they exchanged glances, a silent confirmation of unity. But as he laid out their plan to present their individual narratives to the board, he couldn't quell the sudden tightening in his stomach. Would they have enough compelling stories to sway indifferent minds? The first vendor took the stage, and Charlie observed intently as the man spoke of his journey: loss, resilience, hope. His vulnerability ignited something deep within the audience, and Charlie felt a surge of something almost electric. But it was soon overshadowed by Charlie's running personal commentary. Was his own story compelling enough? Would he be able to command the same attention? As each vendor's truth resonated, Charlie's self-doubt began twisting into awareness, a realization that their collective experiences were far more impactful than anything he could deliver alone. Tara stepped up next, and as she shared her story, the challenges of balancing multiple jobs and the grit it took to keep going, Charlie witnessed her transformation. This was no longer just about rebutting a fine, it was about reclaiming their identities and voices. When it was finally his turn, he felt the weight of not only his predicament but theirs too. As he stood before them, the very fear that had plagued him moments earlier morphed into fierce determination. "I'm here not just to fight against this fine, but to celebrate our perseverance, our creativity," he said, voice carrying an urgency he hadn't anticipated. The surprising clarity of that moment filled him with a newfound strength. Charlie pressed deeper into the stories of the vendors, blending their lives together until he felt their hopes and struggles intertwine with his own. This wasn't just his fight. It was theirs. As the meeting concluded, he basked in the satisfaction of having finally unveiled the collective spirit that had been buried. But as he stepped off the stage, the uncertainty crept back. What would happen once the officials heard their voices? Would they respond or retaliate? When he felt Tara's eyes on him as they gathered for post-presentation conversation, he knew they had only scratched the surface of their potential, but the road ahead still loomed uncertain. He couldn't shake the feeling that their fight had only just begun. Would they have enough resolve to withstand whatever opposition came next? Charlie's heart raced with anticipation as he prepared for the inevitable confrontation ahead. Moments like these often changed everything. A sense of weightlessness overtook Charlie as the adrenaline from his speech began to fade. The post-presentation discussions were filled with a flurry of voices bouncing off the makeshift walls, yet his mind spiraled inwards, focused on the whiteboard where they had scrawled their demands. Each word next to the bold lettering pulsated with potential, eliciting a strange mix of hope and anxiety. "Remember, this is just the beginning," Olivia said, her hand resting gently on Charlie's shoulder. Her voice was the grounding force he needed amidst the chaos. But as he met her gaze, doubt flickered within him. Was beginning enough? He wasn't just leading them through a presentation, he had to navigate them through the storm that was bound to follow. As vendors exchanged their takeaways from the meeting, Charlie felt an urge to ensure they prepared for any backlash. It would go beyond mere disappointment if their message fell on deaf ears. Such a thought pricked at his consciousness. What if they experienced retaliation? He took a breath, refocusing his thoughts on the journey ahead because this was an inflection point, both for him and the group. He gathered everyone's attention, a mix of determination and trepidation swirling internally. "We need a plan," he stated, his words cutting through the chatter. "Our stories are powerful, but we have to be strategic about how we engage with city officials moving forward." Tara, her voice still touched with the tremors of anxiety, asked, "What if they dismiss us again? What if they double down on the fine?" Her fear echoed in Charlie's chest, a stark reminder of the resistance they might face. Silencing the noise within him, he drew upon the strength he felt during his speech. "That's possible," Charlie acknowledged, allowing the weight of her question to settle. "But if they do, we have to be ready to push back. We have the stories, now we need more than words, solidarity and action." With each moment, Charlie's leadership began to solidify. Conversations sparked around him as they discussed outreach strategies and gathering community support. Voices that had once trembled with fear now brimmed with conviction. He saw Tara's face soften as she contributed ideas, and even the quieter members began to engage. They were coalescing not just for their present battles but for the future they wanted. Later that day, as the vendors began to disperse, Charlie lingered, turning over the day's progress in his mind. His thoughts revolved around their emerging unity, but lingering fears about the city's response lingered. Feeling fueled by his role, he knew he could not leave things to chance. Their story needed to resonate beyond their small circle. Reaching out to Olivia, he asked, "Do you think organizing a follow-up meeting with the city officials is a good idea?" Her eyes lit up with understanding, a reflection of Charlie's newfound clarity. "Yes, but we have to come in stronger this time," she replied. "We can strategize how to frame our message better. We need to bring our best arguments and perhaps even invite community leaders to join us. Show them this is bigger than just us." That gleam of inspiration sparked something primal within Charlie, an urge to shift from reactive to proactive thinking. He realized that this was no longer just about mitigating a fine, it was about establishing a foothold in their narrative. However, he sensed the need for a more defined structure. More than shared stories, they required an undeniable coalition that could withstand scrutiny. Over the following days, he meticulously planned the next steps, recruiting vendors to assist in drafting letters, scheduling meetings, and honing their message. The words on the whiteboard began to transform into an onslaught of actions that would give tangible life to their cause. But that pressing question still lurked in the back of Charlie's mind. Would they truly possess the resilience needed to follow through against powerful adversaries? As he watched the vendors rally together, he couldn't shake the feeling that their true test was still to come. With determination radiating through him, he reminded himself that this journey was not solely about survival. It was about thriving, about reclaiming their right to exist with dignity. Charlie couldn't predict the outcome, but he was resolute. They would face whatever came next together. As they planned for the next meeting, a single thought struck him and left an indelible mark on his heart. What if their efforts also painted a target on their backs? The thought filled him with both dread and exhilaration, an intensity that coalesced around the uncertainty of their future battles. The time had come to uncover how deep their courage would go. Would they stand their ground when the stakes had never been higher? Charlie awoke the next morning with the weight of the world resting heavily on his shoulders. The neon glow from the cafe sign outside filtered through his window, signaling the dawn of a new day, but instead of the promise of fresh possibilities, it served as a reminder of the approaching confrontation. He sat on his bed, staring at the wall where he had started jotting his thoughts, a mix of strategies and fears. Today was crucial. He rolled out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen, the floor cold beneath his bare feet. As he poured coffee into his cup, he couldn't ignore the gnawing anxiety twisting in his gut. The meeting with the city officials loomed, and while he felt a surge of responsibility to his fellow vendors, there was also an unsettling fear that threatened to cloud his focus. How had he gotten to this point, carrying the hopes of others while grappling with his self-doubt? Charlie's mind replayed Tara's question from the meeting days before. What if they dismissed them again? It was a fear he shared. What if this bold step shattered the fragile unity they had begun to build? Yet, as he took a sip of the bitter brew, he felt a flicker of resolve. He would not let fear dictate his actions, he would confront it head-on. As the sun crested the horizon, casting rays of light that brightened his small apartment, Charlie opened his laptop, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Today, he would write a draft that not only addressed their grievances but also established their rights to be heard. He envisioned himself as a catalyst, not merely spewing words of frustration but strategically crafting a message that resonated. It had to be more than a plea, it needed to inspire action. After hours of revisions, he stepped back to examine the words before him. "We will not cower under the weight of bureaucracy," read one particularly potent line. Did it truly represent the shared sentiment of his peers? Charlie pondered whether he had the right to speak on behalf of others or if he'd become just another voice drowning in the sea of frustration. In a moment of reflection, he considered his previous experiences. His journey thus far had peeled back layers of an identity he hadn't fully recognized. Was he a mere vendor, or a leader sculpted by adversity? Leaning back in his chair, Charlie realized he had a voice. He'd navigated choices that many wouldn't dare to explore. After sending the draft to Olivia for feedback, he sought out the vendors to discuss finalizing their message. It was during this informal meeting that Charlie discovered the hidden talents among his peers. One vendor, Jason, had experience in public relations before taking to the streets to grill gourmet sandwiches. He began to offer ways to refine their messaging and presentation, his confidence rising as he shared strategies that old PR campaigns had taught him. Discovering such skills within the group rekindled something in Charlie. This wasn't purely his battle, it was a collective effort fortified by diverse experiences. Each vendor brought unique perspectives, and as they gathered their narratives, Charlie began weaving a robust tapestry of thoughts and ideas, each thread strengthening their case. But just as he felt the tides shifting powerful beneath them, a knock at the door interrupted his momentum. It was Olivia, face drawn and anxious. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite an underlying tremor. The look in her eyes warned that whatever news she carried was heavy. "What's wrong?" Charlie asked, a knot forming in his stomach. Was it about city officials? A new obstacle? It's about the meeting. They're not just dismissing this, they're sending someone with authority, someone high up. Charlie's thoughts raced. The city was mobilizing its defenses, sending someone not just to listen, but to counter their efforts. It was a clear signal they were taking this seriously, perhaps a little too seriously. As the realization set in, a surge of determination ignited within him. This was not the moment to waver but to elevate. He and his peers needed to summon every ounce of courage they possessed. Charlie opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat. The stakes had just escalated, and with it came the instinct to retreat. But retreat was a luxury none of them could afford. Then we gather everything we have. We bring our strength and resolve. As nervous energy cascaded around him, Charlie felt a spark. This was no longer just a fight against a fine, it had transformed into a battle for their very existence. What would they bring to the table against such powerful opposition? And would admitting fear allow them to confront it, or would it risk their very shot at triumph? The moments ahead would determine whether they would solidify their stance or fracture under pressure. Desperation loomed, fueled by a burning question: could his collective possess the courage to claim their truths against a formidable adversary? The day of the meeting dawned bright, but it was marked by an undercurrent of tension that surged through Charlie like electricity. As he donned the same tie he had worn days prior, he glanced in the mirror, reflecting not just the man he was but the leader he had become. His heart swelled with resolve, tempered by the uncertainty that accompanied the escalating stakes. This was their moment. This was it. With his notebook clutched tightly in hand, he stepped into the meeting room filled with fellow vendors. Each face radiated a mix of anxiety and determination, all gathered to ensure their collective voice echoed against those wielding authority. Olivia stood beside him, her presence a comforting anchor amidst the brewing storm. As they settled in, Charlie's mind raced with the multifaceted stories they had woven together, the struggles, the triumphs, the shared humanity hidden beneath the surface. Today, they would share those tales. This was not merely a confrontation but an opportunity to demand recognition of their inherent dignity. The representative from the city arrived, a sharp-suited figure who surveyed the room with an air of indifference. Charlie felt the pit in his stomach deepen as the official readied his responses like arrows raised against them. But he reminded himself of the strength gathered within this room. It was time for action, it was time to stand firm. "Thank you for meeting with us," Charlie began, stepping forward. He felt the weight of his words as he laid out their story. Each vendor's narrative was laced with resilience, opportunity lost, and dreams deferred. As he spoke, he could see flickers of recognition in the faces around the table. Their struggle was undeniably real. With every shared story, Charlie could feel a palpable shift in energy. It was no longer him versus the city, it was a united front, each narrative intertwining to portray their collective strength. The city representative attempted to interject with dismissive remarks, but Charlie pressed on with renewed vigor. He reached into the hearts of his colleagues, rallying their fears and dreams. This collaboration ignited a series of impassioned declarations that intensified as the momentum built. Charlie presented their demands not just for leniency with the fine, but for systemic change and acknowledgement of the vital contributions these vendors made to the community. The words flowed with purpose, igniting a spark that electrified the atmosphere. This was not just about one hot dog cart, this was about a coalition of voices demanding respect. For the first time, he could see uncertainty creeping into the city representative's aloof demeanor. As they concluded their presentation, Charlie felt an undeniable surge of hope. They had turned the tide, they were no longer shadows in the city. They were a chorus united in purpose, resonating with truth and undeniable strength. When the meeting concluded, the atmosphere shifted into one of tentative optimism. Charlie sensed the weight of what they had accomplished together, resonating profoundly within him. It wasn't merely about the fine, it was about reclaiming their identities. They had laid their truths bare, demanding acknowledgement. As they exited the building, Charlie felt elated, buoyed by adrenaline. Beyond confrontation, they had ignited a movement, a call for representation and respect. This wasn't the end, but a significant milestone in their journey. Over the days that followed, as they awaited the city's response, Charlie reveled in conversations with fellow vendors, now brimming with possibilities. Each interaction reinforced the newfound bond among them. It became clear that this inquiry about their existence and contributions was not merely an isolated incident but a call for change that would ripple across the city. When a call from the city finally came in, Charlie's heart raced again, fueled by the awareness that this would be a pivotal moment. The representative's tone was measured, but ultimately financial penalties were reduced. More crucially, there was recognition of their plight and a commitment to consider their input for future ordinances about vendor permits. This small victory ignited more than just relief, it sparked a sense of empowerment among them. What had begun as despair over a fine transformed into an organization aimed at furthering their agenda. Charlie felt a sense of pride swell within him, echoing through every interaction with his son, Ethan, who beamed with admiration for his father's tenacity. In the months that followed, Charlie led initiatives that united vendors in sharing stories with other community leaders, advocating for necessary reform. Each time he spoke, he felt the echoes of their narratives weaving through his words, solidifying his role not just as a hot dog vendor but as an advocate for justice. There was a profound satisfaction in the metamorphosis he had undergone. From a man burdened by grief and hopelessness to a galvanizing force for change, he understood that he had turned the darkest moments of his life into avenues for growth. No longer invisible, he had proven that vulnerability could be the heart of resilience. Standing once more in front of the busy intersection, surveying the ebb and flow of life that surrounded his cart, Charlie reflected on the profound journey thus far. He felt confident, not just in himself, but in the collective strength they had fostered. Each decision taken from fear and anxiety had transformed into opportunities of unity and empowerment. So much had changed since the day that fine was imposed. And while challenges lay ahead, Charlie grasped the collective resolve that had shifted throughout their community. They were stronger together. They were visible. They were thriving. And all he could do was smile. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible transformation. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.